So where are we? We're 7:30 in the morning, and time to go completely free fall. Free fall to what end? To make spiritual connection. Till we feel so spiritually connected at 7:30 in the morning. So when I am weak, though, then am I strong. For God's strength is made perfect in weakness. So out of weakness is strength. And a good time when you feel first thing in the morning, waking your body up. Here you are in your body. Here I am in my body, a 68-year-old body. So quite a short period of time on this earth when you add that up in a freefall sense, in that you have thousands of years to live in. Thousands, if not millions, trillions, billions, trillions. Trillions being more than billions, so trillions of years ahead of us. That's Earth years. How do they measure years in other realms? Here you have the rising and the setting of the sun and the 4 seasons. And of course we got good these days at measuring these, and we have 365 days in a year, and every so often we have a leap year to make sure we don't race ahead or catch up, whatever, in time. So time, depending upon how we measure it in the spiritual dimension, do they have the rising of the sun and the setting of the sun? They don't measure it the same there. So I guess when we leave this life here, it'd be quite an adjustment, like going to a foreign land or a foreign country, but in our case, leaving this world would be like going to a foreign world. Have you ever imagined going to a foreign planet? Well, it won't be so much a planet, it'll be another dimension. And they do say, and I've heard it said, that in this same sense, the spiritual realm, dimension, whatever you wish to call it, even heaven or the heavenlies, it has a way of running concurrent with this world, in that it's like a wall that you can pass through. And that's just to simply explain it in earthly terms. And I always think, well, if you live in a semi-detached house, then there's people next door. They could only be a few feet away. Behind the wall over there, across there, I have a fireplace. And the other side of that wall, there would be another section of the house where other people live, neighbours. And there could be someone only a few feet away, depending upon where you're sitting, but you're oblivious to them. So those in the spiritual realm, dimension, heavenlies, wherever you wish to label these places, can so easily cross into this world and back into their world. But we're clearly, in this same sense, bound to this world. But now and then, certain people get a glimpse into that other realm, as did St. Paul. He called it the third heaven. He was taken up into the third heaven. And he called it the third heaven because in this world you have the atmospheric heavens being one. You look out the window there. For me, it's a cloudy day. But we have the sun and the blue skies, if you can see them, and the clouds. That's one form of heaven. The word for heaven originally was largely the atmospheric heavens out there, which of course was void of everything. There was no sun, no moon, no stars. When God first created this world, there was just an empty void of space. Darkness, it says, was upon the deep. So you picture a world covered in deep, dark waters and absolutely no light. And God says, let there be light, but it wasn't sunlight. So kind of an intangible light, no explanation as to where the light was coming from. It wasn't coming from the sun. It wasn't coming from the moon. You have the greater light created on the 4th day. The greater light and the lesser light to rule the night. The greater light to rule the day. The lesser light to rule the night. So you have the first heaven where we largely see the sun, and you can see the moon sometimes. You have the second heaven, you have the stars. And so he likened to the third heaven. So there's different heavens, the word heaven having its origin in the atmospheric heavens. the great void of space, which was filled with the sun, moon, stars. So first heaven, where we see the skies and the sun. Second heaven, the stars and the planets. Third heaven, the spiritual dimension. So Paul had a way of leaping in and out of the spiritual dimension at times in his life, and he was taken up to the third heaven. In other words, he was taken into that spiritual realm, which he chose to call the third heaven. Well, Paul had of course, a lot of our things we have a way of saying come from the scriptures, and Paul wrote quite a lot of the books, the epistles of St. Paul in the New Testament. And he would often talk about the resurrection. Now, these days, you get a definite impression that the resurrection has gone completely out of style. And largely, when you hear talk of the resurrection, it might come up at Easter. And you have a lot of pre-trib people, if people understand what that term means, a time of great trouble on the earth. These feeling that we're going to be resurrected before this great tribulation. But they've changed the name resurrection to rapture. But the word rapture isn't even in the Bible, so it's a new word that's been introduced to sum up the resurrection, that Jesus is coming back and is going to take us out of the great troubles that are going to come to the world before the great tribulation. And they coined the phrase, the word rapture, but rapture isn't even in the Bible. And it sounds, to me personally, it sounds like a very corny word. It doesn't really do it for me. And you think, well, what is the resurrection and how much should we preach the resurrection? Paul felt like the whole thing was null and void if he didn't preach the resurrection. So you have to preach the resurrection if you're going to preach the gospel, because largely this is the theme going through the New Testament, that we look forward to the resurrection. The wages of sin being death, and therefore we're all destined to die because we've all inherited a body. Down through the ages, the genes were passed on as coming from Adam and Eve, who originally weren't meant to die. So somehow or other they were given a body that wasn't meant to die. So you'd had Adam, he failed in his mission on earth. Jesus came along and they called Jesus the second Adam. Well, Jesus, unlike Adam, fulfilled his mission on earth. And in this same sense, he reversed what Adam had done, in that in Adam we all die. In Jesus Christ, we all live. What does this mean? Jesus Christ came back to life 3 days after his death, and he was resurrected, came back to life. And so he, being the first fruits, offers us the same, in that we too can come back to life at the second coming of Jesus Christ. Hence you have the resurrection. Well, the resurrection, what it means is you're going to have, in this same sense, a new body. This body is a mortal body, and it's not immortal. But your new body, the new you, the new body, that this body is somehow or other going to change, as it's put, we shall be changed in a moment, in the twinkling of an eye. Well, how does Paul know we would be changed in a moment, in the twinkling of an eye? Well, we have an example that Jesus gave when he raised Lazarus from the dead. Well, Lazarus had been dead 4 days and he clearly stunk. Now, one of the Mary and Martha were kind of girlfriends of Jesus. And these one of these would say, look, Jesus, you can't help, I believe you can raise him from the dead, but he stinketh. He's been dead 4 days. But even so, I know you're the Son of God. And I believe in the resurrection, that somehow or other we're going to have, in this same sense, a new body. I believe that even now you can raise Lazarus from the dead. So Jesus just simply spoke the words and says, Lazarus, come forth. And in that moment, in that twinkling of an eye of time, Lazarus came out of his tomb and was alive again after being dead 4 days, to the point where he was stinker. So his body was deteriorating, and he clearly stunk, as a body does when it is decaying and dying. So that was one sample or example of the resurrection. And then Jesus said after that, I am the resurrection and the life. He that believeth in me, though he were dead, yet shall he live. Now, this is the hope that the Bible gives us of the resurrection. So it's kind of clear from this that we are, in this same sense, a spirit that lives in a body. And one day this body, of course, is going to die, and the spirit will leave this body, as it says in Ecclesiastes. The spirit will return to God who gave it. So interesting words that Paul would sometimes come up with regarding the resurrection. And of course, this can sound like pretty corny talk to a lot of people, the rapture, the resurrection. It all sounds very religious. And you kind of try to get your head around it. So what you're saying is in layman's terms, which he sometimes put it in layman's terms, which seem to help, talking about it in a different light, in a different way, and putting all this in a new light rather than the old light and the religious connotations to that light. So many now talking about the rapture, it sounds like rupture. It doesn't exactly grab people. And even when you talk about the resurrection, people sum up religious scenes at Easter and all these religious ceremonies and the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit, and even graveyard scene, the hope of the resurrection. It all sounds very sobering and very religious and very much along the tones of an organ at a church, which has a way of summoning up that kind of religious spirit. So how do you get out of the religious spirit and put this in the right light? Well, obviously you're going to stick exactly to the scriptures. And it's interesting to put it in a new light, but it's the same light. You can put it in a new light, but the same light. That doesn't mean you're going over to another light. We all have our different ways of expressing or shining our light. Let your light so shine before men, it says, that men may see your good works and glorify your Father which is in heaven. Well, every one of us, God willing, is a precious stone, and in God's eyes, the soul, your spirit in your body, is priceless. You're a priceless soul. And therefore, in this same sense, you're like a gem in God's eyes, a diamond or a gem, whichever you like. And diamonds and stones and gems and precious stones can be of different colours. And so God, in this same sense, would pour down his spirit upon these various people that he's created, which in God's eyes are like precious stones and gems, and each shining his light in the way that God created that person to shine their light. So one stone might give out a red light, another stone might give out a blue light, another stone might give out even a yellow or a purple light, or a blend of colours. So we all should be in God's spirit and God willing, expressing our individualistic light as coming from God. And this is what it's all about. We're all individuals. We're all created unique in God's eyes, and we all have a unique destiny and a unique place in God's creation. And this is what we're trying to do in life, whether we understand this or not. We're trying to find our unique place in God's destinations, in God's future that he's designed for us to have, the good works even that God has designed us all individually to walk in. So we all have our various roles in the cosmos, as they say, but also it's more a case of finding our role and place in the spiritual dimension, and then walking in God's light and expressing God's light in a unique, individualistic way, and finding our place in the great plan of God. and finding our various groups and gatherings and peoples and tribes that we belong to, though not being bound by whether they come from this country or that country or this background or that background. It's surprising how many strange bedfellows there are in the world, as they say, that somehow, rather miraculously so, God has designed this person to be with that person, or these people with those people, and they come from these various cultural backgrounds of upbringing and influences in their past, and somehow or other God brings them together and they find this unique place in God's kingdom. Well, one of our unique places in God's kingdom will take place at the time of the resurrection, the time when Jesus comes back. And like Paul said, he's always talking, very often talking about the theme going through the New Testament, the resurrection. So interesting how he put it like this in 2 Corinthians chapter 5. And he's expressing his concerns here in chapter 4, let's say, of 2 Corinthians. And he's saying often these thoughts of the afterlife and resurrection and such things as to where do we go from here, what are we doing in this world? We ask these questions in this life so often because we are troubled and perplexed on every side, as Paul put it. And therefore we develop this spiritual leaning, whereby we find ourselves in this same sense walking amongst the stars looking for answers. Well, we are troubled on every side, says St. Paul, yet not distressed. We are perplexed, but not in despair, persecuted, but not forsaken, cast down, but not destroyed. So he's clearly going through a lot of troubles, and he's putting his thoughts and thinking outwards and upwards. For he's going to talk about, he's coming at the resurrection and the question of a new body from another angle here. So kind of opening up that word resurrection. So in chapter 5, 2 Corinthians chapter 5, we know that if our earthly house, now he's likening the body here to a house. This is your earthly house. Well, old houses, for whatever reasons, can be knocked down, can be destroyed, can go into deterioration. So everything in this world has a way of aging and getting old. So he goes on to say in another verse, the things which are seen are temporary, but the things which are not seen are eternal. So we look not at the things which are seen, but at the things which are not seen, for the things which are seen are temporary, but the things which are not seen are eternal. So he's frequently spinning his mind upwards and looking at the eternal realities of life, the eternal values in life, as opposed to this temporary earthly existence that he felt he had. And of course, his mission in life was to preach the gospel. And he indeed preached the gospel to the full. So he'd frequently refer to the resurrection. And referring to the resurrection would be referring to the fact that you are in a body. And he's putting it here that you're in a house, even a tabernacle or in a temple, as Jesus put it. Jesus said, destroy this temple, and in 3 days I will raise it up. But he's talking about his body. When Jesus died, he gives up the ghost. The ghost, in this same sense, is the spirit that's in the body. When God created Adam, he breathed into his nostrils, and Adam became a living soul. He became both body and spirit. This is what we are. We're body and spirit, and we've been placed into flesh as in a spiritual sense. We are a spirit in this sense, and I can't say what the spirit looks like, but clearly those from that other realm have a way of speaking to people in that you don't always see them, but you know what they're saying. And so there's definite communication as coming from that other realm. And often these visitations that people get, they're not always aware of what the person looks like. Whether it's an angel or even a departed saint, even departed saints have appeared to people. And that is also in the scriptures. Clearly, Jesus saw Elijah and Moses, and they were communicating in what was called the Transfiguration. So it's a reality that visitations do come from that other realm. Sometimes they cross that wall into this realm. And the disciples, Peter, James, and John, as I recall, saw these, Moses and Elijah, talking to Jesus about his death that he was going to accomplish in Jerusalem. Obviously talking about his death, and then you're going to go on to talk about the death and resurrection, Jesus coming back to life 3 days later. Why would he do that? So that we can do the same. So clearly this vehicle that we've been placed in wasn't meant to die from the beginning, but God obviously knew what man would do. And therefore, clearly every person coming into this world will die. Whereas in God's ultimate plan was not that people should come into life and die, but being human, we all die because we've inherited the sin of Adam, let's say, and this has been passed on. So Jesus, being the second Adam, in this same sense, reversed the process. So in Adam, we all die, but in Jesus Christ, we all live. In other words, we will come back to life as Jesus did. Jesus, dead 3 days, comes back to life. Lazarus, dead 4 days and stinking. Jesus giving us an example of what he can do. And all he had to say, it was a few words, and then in a moment, in a twinkling of an eye, Lazarus, he says, come forth. And then suddenly they're moving this, they've already moved the tombstone away. And Jesus, in that very instant moment in time, in the moment of time, in the twinkling of an eye, it says the dead in Christ shall rise first. We can't get our head around this, but we have a story, a true story of Lazarus, which Jesus gave as an example that he indeed is the resurrection of the life. He can indeed raise people back to life, even though they've been dead 4 days and are stinking. And in a moment, in the twinkling of an eye, all he had to say was, Lazarus, come forth. And who should walk out of the tomb dressed in all of those rags or whatever they put round the body? And there he was for every eye to see. And you know what this did? This sealed Jesus' fate on earth. When the Pharisees heard that Lazarus had risen from the dead and that the crowds were flocking to Jesus, the cat was out of the bag. Indeed, this is the Christ that we've been waiting for. What did the Pharisees decide? He has to go. So Jesus not only raising Lazarus from the dead, but sealing his own fate. From then onwards, they sought to kill Jesus, and they also sought to kill Lazarus. Well, for we know, says St. Paul, so he's going through all these troubles, trials and tests, and what do? We lift up our eyes and our hearts, and we develop our spiritual leaning, and we're looking forward to the resurrection, a time when we shall be changed in a moment, the twinkling of an eye. So chapter 5, 2 Corinthians chapter 5, for we know that if our earthly house, now he's talking about the body and he's calling it a house. For we know that if our earthly house of this tabernacle were dissolved. So he's calling the body in the Old Testament, they had a tabernacle, which was like the temple. Before they had the temple, they had what you might call a tent, because they moved around a lot in the wilderness. They couldn't just pick up bricks and mortar and rebuild the temple everywhere they went. So God told them to build a tent. And this was called a tabernacle, which was their temple in the Old Testament. So Paul here is referring to the body, this body that we're all in, as a house or a tabernacle. Jesus called it a temple. So for we know that if our earthly house of this tabernacle were dissolved, so in other words, goes into decay and dies. And back then, people were either burning at the stake, or they would bury them when they died, or these days people are cremated. Either way you look at it, the body is eventually dissolved. So dissolved is a good word. For we know that if our earthly house of this tabernacle were dissolved, we have a building of God. Now he's talking about the body. We have a building of God and house. So he's calling the body a house here. And a house not made with hands, eternal in the heavens. So can we get our head around that? We have an earthly house, an earthly tabernacle, an earthly body, which Paul is now calling a tabernacle or a house, a temple, in other words, or a house, a building, in other words. For we know that if our earthly house of this tabernacle were dissolved, we have a building, in other words, a body of God, an house, a body, not made with hands, eternal in the heavens. So you kind of have the promise of the resurrection in that you have an eternal body waiting for you somewhere or other in the heavens, in the spiritual sense, as coming from the spiritual realm in this sense. You have a body in this sense, in this promise of God, that you will one day dwell in as a contrary to this body, it will live forever. So we have a building of God, in other words, a body of God, an house, and don't forget he's talking symbolically, an house not made with hands. So it's not made with human hands. Houses on earth are made with human hands. This house is made by God, and you could say it's spoken into existence. When God made this world, he spoke it into existence. When God made the sun and the moon and the stars, he spoke the sun, the moon and the stars into existence. So if God can speak a world into existence, if God can say, let there be light, let there be the sun, the moon and the stars, the greater light to rule the day, and the lesser light to rule the night. If God can create millions and billions of stars, which will be bigger than the earth, you can get a million earths into the sun. And you can probably get a million billion suns into many stars. So if God can create these heavenly bodies out there, the sun, the moon, and the stars, if God can create a world, if God can create all of these various fish, and each one of them have a form of a body, if God can speak the word and millions of birds are suddenly flying into the sky, and millions of fish are swimming in the sea, and millions of animals and plants and such are roaming the earth, they all have a form of a body. If God can speak all of these into existence, then God only has to say the word and it's done. So we have a building of God, and house not made with hands, eternal in the heavens. For in this we groan earnestly, desiring to be clothed upon with our house, which is from heaven. So you're in this body, and if you get to certain ages in this life, like I say, 68 years old, you tend to get so many more aches and pains that you didn't get when once you were youthful and running around and doing all those things you did as a child. Suddenly it's not the same no more. So like Paul, for in this we groan. So he's groaning, he wants to get out of the body he's in. He's not so happy in his body that he's in. He's not doing so well. He's getting so many aches and pains in that body. And they do say that Paul was losing sight towards the end of his life. So, for in this we groan earnestly, desiring to be clothed upon with our house which is from heaven. So now he's likening the body, the new body that you're going to get that's from heaven, that you're going to be clothed upon. So you kind of picture, well, you've got a spirit. And Paul's calling this body, he's referring to it symbolically as being a house. So a house is something a person lives in. So me being a spirit would live in this house, in this body, in this tabernacle. Well, the heavenly body will be clothed upon. So now he's using the word clothes, to be clothed upon, symbolic of your new body. So, which is from heaven. So, for in this we groan earnestly, desiring to be clothed upon with our house which is from heaven. So you have a new body to look forward to. If so be that being clothed we shall not be found naked. Well, they say there's nothing more naked than the soul. A soul even has clothing to clothe it. Well, when you leave this body, it says, naked came I into this world. Naked shall I return thither to go as I came. You read that carefully and you're thinking, if I'm naked, shall I return thither to go as I came? Then it must be largely talking about the soul. Clearly we came into this world naked in a physical sense. Naked came I into this world, naked shall I return thither to go as I came. So there's nothing more naked than your spirit. Your spirit, even in this same sense, is clothed with a body. When you die, you'll leave this body and you'll go back to God. The spirit will return to God who gave it. And I wonder what we'll all have to say to God when we stand before God and give an account of ourselves. So if so be that being clothed we shall not be found naked. For we that are in this tabernacle, he's calling it a tabernacle again, do groan, this body, being burdened, not for that we would be unclothed. Well, he kind of wants to leave, but he knows he has to stay here. But clothed upon, that mortality might be swallowed up of life. So he wishes he wasn't in a mortal body. In another verse, he put it, this corruptible, this body that can deteriorate, get old, die, have aches and pains, can go faulty and wrong, get arthritis or whatever people get, backache, or they can't walk no more. The joints wear out, the eyes fade and the ears go dull and the teeth fall out, etc., etc. Well, this is what he's talking about, this corruptible, this body that can clearly go wrong. It's corruptible. This corruptible will one day put on incorruption. This mortal will one day put on immortality. That's what he's talking about here. For we that are in this tabernacle do groan. In other words, in this body do groan, being burdened by the weight of the flesh. In other words, and all the suffering and trials and troubles and tests that we endure here. Not for that we would be unclothed. Okay, he's not wishing so much that he could kill himself or commit suicide as people do, but clothed upon. He wishes he had his new body, in other words. Either way you look at it, we're going to live forever. And the realities are we're going to need a body. So what body are we going to live in forever? It is a reality that we were created a living soul. We were created both body and soul. This is everything we're meant to be. A lot of people have the view that we'll die and leave this body behind and we'll go back into the spirit world and we'll simply be a spirit forever. Well, those that have already died in Jesus Christ are actually looking forward to being reunited. They in the spirit world that have died in Jesus Christ are looking forward to the resurrection. They're looking forward to the day when they too will have a new body. On earth, we go through these trials, troubles and tests, and in our mortal bodies, we do groan. And we're looking forward to the resurrection. They're even looking forward to the resurrection in the spirit world. They're looking forward to the day that they'll be reunited with their body and they'll be changed in a moment, in the twinkling of an eye. The dead in Christ shall rise first. Then we which are alive and remain shall be caught up together with them in the clouds to meet the Lord in the air. This is the hope of the resurrection, whether you're in this world or that world. For we that are in this tabernacle do groan, being burdened, not for that we would be unclothed. In other words, he's not kind of like it's developing suicidal thoughts or thinking, well, I should leave here. No, if God's put us here, then we should see it through to the end. But clothed upon, that mortality might be swallowed up of life. That mortality might be swallowed up by immortality, by a body that lives forever and is no more corruptible. Doesn't get sick, doesn't get ill, doesn't get aches and pains, can't be shot down, can't be hit by a car, it's indestructible. Now he that have wrought us for this self-same thing is God. In other words, God designed us this way. Who also have given unto us the earnest of the Spirit. So Spirit with a capital S there. So we have an example of the spiritual realities of life. How come? Because we have Jesus Christ in our hearts. And having Jesus Christ in our hearts tells us that Jesus is indeed still alive. Clearly, we know he died all those years ago. But clearly, if you have Jesus Christ, if you've asked Jesus Christ into your heart, and you made that strong spiritual connection with Jesus, You've made that strong spiritual connection with Jesus even through the words. You've asked Jesus into your heart, and then suddenly when your eyes fall upon the words in the King James Version of the Bible, in the beginning was the Word, Jesus Christ. And the Word was with God, Jesus Christ. And the Word was God. The same was in the beginning with God. All the things were made by him. And without him was not anything made that was made. And his spirit, the words that Jesus speaks are spirit and they are life. So we ask Jesus Christ into our hearts, and our eyes fall upon the scriptures, and suddenly these scriptures come alive spiritually, and clearly Jesus Christ is the Word. So ask Jesus Christ into your heart, and he'll fill you with his spirit. Then glance your eyes upon the scriptures in the King James Version of the Bible, and read the words of Jesus. Jesus saying, the words that I speak unto you, they are spirit and they are life. So read those words spiritually, and you will make that spiritual connection with Jesus Christ, whose goings forth have been from of old, from everlasting. He's coming from everlasting. He's going to everlasting. He came to this world, and the Word was made flesh. He dies and leaves this world in his resurrected body, and all of the saints that have truly connected spiritually with Jesus Christ still feel Jesus Christ in their hearts today. So we have this earnest, this sincere spirit in us, urging us and driving us forward, and we have Jesus Christ, who's the first fruits, clearly alive again after death, and that we've made this great spiritual connection with him. Proof that there is life after death, that Jesus indeed is alive today. Jesus Christ the same yesterday, today, and forever, is in his resurrected body, and we have made that spiritual connection with Jesus, as can you, if you simply ask Jesus Christ into your heart. You acknowledge that you're so full of fault. Jesus Christ, tempted in all points like as we are, yet without sin. He's the second Adam. In Christ we all live. And at the second coming of Jesus Christ, we too will have a resurrected body just like Jesus. Now he that hath wrought for us, he that hath wrought us for the self same thing is God. This is God's plan, who have given unto us the earnest, the sincerity of the Spirit with a capital S. Therefore we are always confident. We're confident because we have Jesus in our hearts. We know he's still alive. We know that we're going to live again after this life. Therefore, we are always confident, having knowing that while we are at home in the body, so the body, the house, we're at home here. We're at in this world where he's placed us. This is God's will, that we're here. God has put us here. He's put us here to go through many trials and tests and to grow spiritually. We are therefore we are always confident, knowing that whilst we're at home in the body, this body, we are absent from the Lord. Yes, we're absent from the Lord, but it doesn't mean we won't one day be with the Lord. For we walk by faith and not by sight. We are confident, I say, says Paul, right? We are confident, I say, and willing rather to be absent from the body. He wishes he could just leave this body and go back to that third heaven that he's seen before. He went to the third heaven. Clearly he knows that that place exists, it's real. Whether in the body, he said, or out of the body, I cannot tell. All he knows was God took him there. God took him to that third heaven and showed him how real it really was. So he couldn't understand how it works, whether in the body or out of the body. I know not. All I know was it happened. I went to that spiritual realm, that spiritual place in that other realm. And this place exists. We are confident, I say, and willing rather to be absent from the body, to be present with the Lord. Wherefore we labour that whether present or absent, we may be accepted of him. For we must all, now this is what life's all about. The purpose of life here, for we must all appear before the judgment seat of Christ, that everyone may receive, this is again, you're looking at the afterlife here. At the time of the resurrection, this is when the saints are judged by Jesus Christ. The books are opened for the saints at the second coming of Jesus Christ. We all look forward to the resurrection, the second coming of Jesus Christ. But what also comes with the second coming of Jesus Christ is the judgment seat of Christ. We must always remember this. We're all looking forward to the day and the time of the resurrection when we get out of this world, and suddenly we're changed in a moment, twinkling of an eye. And this corruptible will put on incorruption, this mortal will put on immortality. We'll meet the Lord in the air, and so shall we ever be with the Lord. We'll ever be with the Lord. But first we go to the judgment seat of Christ, and the books are open. The books are open for the saints, those that are Christians at the second coming of Jesus Christ. But the books are open for the rest of the world who didn't want Jesus after the 1,000-year reign of Jesus Christ. So the time period of the resurrection, suddenly we're free of the burdens and weights of this body and the trials and troubles and tests of this life. And we're suddenly in a resurrected body, so much so that we meet the Lord in the air, just like Jesus when he left this world, and the disciples saw him going off into the clouds in his resurrected body. And it says, and this is the same way Jesus is going to come back. So we meet the Lord in the air. Suddenly these angels be sent out with a great sound of a trumpet to gather together his elect. So suddenly you'll be aware of these angels that will, in this same sense, take you up to meet the Lord in the air, and so shall we ever be with the Lord. But we'll also go to the judgment seat of Christ. So everything we did in this body, in this life, in this world, is all recorded down. So whether we labour that, whether present or absent, we may be accepted of him. So we're presently in this body, in this world, and looking forward to the resurrection, he's saying, and wishing he could just leave this world and his spirit leave his body and go to be with the Lord. For we must all appear before the judgment seat of Christ, that everyone may receive the things done in his body according to that he hath done, whether it be good or whether it be bad. So this is the whole purpose of life. Everything we do here, we should be growing spiritually, and ultimately we'll have a new body at the time of the resurrection, the second coming of Jesus Christ. So praise Jesus.